Oh, I'm just slightly late. I got distracted. But good morning. It's Tom Padula from TomPadulaTV on YouTube and Insegna Booksellers. And this is program number 61 for World History by me on Facebook. I meet you here every Thursday from 11:25 to about 12:30, thereabouts, give and take a few minutes before and after. But today is another interesting one. I was checking up what I had done before, and I thought to myself, that I was up to a particular point of history, and that's why I got distracted. But anyway, I'll start from today. I'll start from. I might repeat just. This is the seeds of democratic government when democracy began to be valued. And generally, democracy is valued when there are weak leaders, because they don't really want to do what, the kings didn't really want to do. They inherited the kingship, and therefore there's a bit of a problem in terms of, do I run this country or this kingdom for myself, or will I get some help? So when things happen, welcome to Colleen Ransley and Zoraida Morris. So this is what happens, is that democracy itself does depend. For example, last time, I think we did this last time, but I'll just read it from Simon de Montfort captures King Henry III. So John's son Henry III was a well-meaning but weak king. That was the key to it from last time. He taxed his subjects so heavily that the barons again rose in revolt under the leadership of Simon de Montfort, Earl of Leicester. In the following Battle of Lewes, the king's men were defeated by Earl Simon's followers, who included a volunteer band of London citizens. Okay? And therefore, this Simon de Montfort calls the first real parliament. So, in 1265, that's where we're at from last time, and then I'll continue from there. But what can I say about history? It's getting more interesting in that, for me, the history of the world is really we have to look at the world as one, as a global unit of humanity. No more wars. We have to protect the planet, and we have to protect the humanity within it. Now, all these old wars about terrain, about, the land, this is my land and this is your land. Come on, that's enough. We've had centuries of it. This is mine, this is yours. When we consider that each one of us only lasts no more than, most people don't last more than 100 years. They're gone. Most people are gone before 100 years. You can live up to 120. Apparently, our body's considered, and there are some real exceptions up to 130, 160, but that's it. It's a period of time that is limited in terms of the eternal life, in terms of eternity. Therefore, a study of global history teaches us how things have developed in different places. Why is it that in some places there is a lot of discoveries? What is the influence that causes, let's say, science to be, and research to be valued above, the idea of faith? You believe in something, and then that's manipulated by the leaders of those various churches, etc., because they're following a particular line of thought. But the reality about our global and universal reality, including up there in the sky with the planets, is that really we don't know much. We can't be God. But we need to believe in a God. That's been the case. Otherwise, there's chaos. And in the Middle Ages, there was two tensions. The one from the Pope, the Christian Pope, that said that, to live a good life, you had to follow certain precepts, certain philosophy, where the people need to be looked after. But the reality was all different. The reality was that the monarchies, under the kings, and with the barons and the counts, they all looked after themselves. So the people, the good leaders always made sure that the people had enough food and shelter, because generally that wasn't the case. When the good leader went, chaos reigned until the next good leader arrived. So that's the problem with all this. Now, it's 11:32 and I'm going to start. And don't forget, I'll be continuing with China, Africa, before the invasion, okay, and then Henry Lawson and Banjo Patterson, etc., like we've done up to now. This is lesson 61. Okay, and the day is Thursday, the 15th of December, 2022. Here we go. So, Simon de Montfort captures King Henry III and calls the first real parliament in 1265. Welcome to Marisa Francavilla. To gain popular support for his actions, de Montfort in 1265 called together representatives of all classes of free men to discuss the position. Notice, all classes of free men, no women. He sent out the orders to people to attend this, the first real parliament, in the name of King Henry III, who was his prisoner. To de Montfort's parliament came not only barons and important churchmen such as had formed the Great Council, but also 2 knights from each shire elected by the landowners, and 2 burgesses or rich citizens from each town, elected by the town councillors. So various classes of people were called. And buongiorno to you too, Marisa Francavilla. King Edward I copies Simon de Montfort. So in the same year as his parliament met, Simon was killed in a battle with the king's son, who later became King Edward I. You have seen how this great king tried to unify his country by conquering Wales and attacking Scotland. But Edward I was as wise as he was brave. Although Simon de Montfort had been a rebel, Edward realised that his idea of including knights of the shire and townsmen in parliament had been a good one. He says, I can't do it all myself. Let's get some help here and see if I can win their hearts. What touches all should be approved by all. That was the situation. What touches all should be approved by all, said the king when he called together another parliament in 1295. 1265 was the first parliament, 1295 the second, a 30-year difference. The model parliament in 1295. This parliament of Edward I has become known as the model parliament because it furnished a pattern for later parliaments. It met in the Great Hall of Westminster, but the barons and bishops who later formed the Upper House or House of Lords, set apart from the knights of the shire, and the burgesses who later formed the Lower House or House of Commons. 2 years later, in 1297, Magna Carta was strengthened when Parliament passed a law saying that the king could not impose certain taxes without its consent. So the king up to there had been able to impose taxes, say tax this much, but as a result of that 1297 meeting again, the law was passed, the king was limited in what he could ask his bureaucracy to do. He said, we cannot impose taxes unless Parliament agrees. So there's a war, you discuss it, and then you approve the funds. But before that, the king made the decision, that was it. Some control of the purse, but king is supreme throughout the Middle Ages. The king is supreme throughout the Middle Ages. Thus, even in the Middle Ages, Parliament began to gain that control of the purse of the nation, which is so important a part of government. But this does not mean that the Parliament had become more powerful than the king. That did not happen until the 17th century. That's 17th century, 1600 to 1699. When the king's men were beaten by the parliamentarians in a civil war, which was much more important than that fought between Simon de Montfort and Henry III. But you should remember that Parliament came into existence and began to have some influence over the king's government before the end of the Middle Ages. So there were some seeds there, some good leaders that wanted the help of the Parliament, and some of them who resisted it. So far, we have said nothing about the liberties of the great majority of Englishmen, the villains and the peasants who, of course, had no voice at all in governing the country. And in the Roman times, the slaves and people who didn't have property, they had no say. Medieval peasant revolts. It is natural for men to love freedom. However, and throughout the Middle Ages, the serfs and peasants rebelled whenever their lives were particularly hard or when circumstances seemed to promise them some hope of success. So they began to revolt. You don't treat us well. Just do, help us out, give us some food, make sure that we work and we can feed our families, etc. That was medieval peasant revolts, and the peasants did not have any influence over the Parliament or the king. So they were just the victims of the system. The statutes of labourers. One such revolt took place in England in 1381, some years after the Black Death had caused such a labour shortage. That was about 1350, the Black Death, our COVID, that was called the Black Death, that killed 1 in 5 in Europe. They lost a lot of people, and therefore there was a shortage of labour. Because the landowners disliked having to pay higher wages in order to get their work done, Parliament made a law called the Statute of Labourers. This law said that no farm labourer was to be paid a wage higher than had been usual before the Black Death, and that any villain who left his lord to seek higher wages elsewhere as a free labourer should be punished by branding him with a red-hot iron. Jesus, like cattle. Later on, cattle in America, they branded the cattle. And in the past too, the branding was done for criminals and people who did not follow the rules of their masters. The Peasants' Revolt 1381, the March on London. The revolt against these harsh conditions began when a Kentish peasant named Wat Tyler knocked down a tax gatherer who was insulting his family. Wat Tyler, W-A-T-T-Y-L-E-R. Look him up. Thousands of villains and peasants, led by Wat and a poor priest named John Ball, marched on London, burning as they went the manor houses of especially unpopular lords. Among those murdered was the hated Simon of Sudbury, who was the king's chancellor and the Archbishop of Canterbury as well. He was a good Christian, wasn't he? The peasants' feelings were summed up in the words of a rhyme that John Ball seemed to have made popular. When Adam delved and and Eve span, who was then a gentleman? When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then a gentleman? Where do you find a gentleman? The peasants' leaders executed. The rebels were met outside London by the Lord Mayor of the city and by the 14-year-old King Richard II, who promised to repeal the statute of labourers and to set free all villains. Satisfied with the king's word, the peasants returned peacefully to their homes. But once the danger had passed, the boy king's promise was broken. Villains you are, and villains you shall remain, he then said. Thousands of peasants were hanged, and villainage continued. Gee, this king, young king, Richard II. Wow. Villains become labourers by about 1500. Nevertheless, the revolt did help to win freedom for the peasants. The rising had alarmed so many lords that they began more and more to accept money instead of labour as payment for the strips of land the villains owned. In this way, practically every villain in England became a free man by 1500, 100 years or more after Wat Tyler's rebellion. So someone has to die before people become free. Always has been like that. Terrible. Terrible. Well, that's it. It's, yes, and then we've got the Renaissance, and then we've got the other ones. Where do we go after that? Where do we go? Well, I think that's it. Once we get to the Renaissance, we get to the end of the Renaissance, then the Middle Ages are over, and yeah. And I'll take a break at that time. Welcome to Pat Bongiovanni. And now we're going to go to China. Let's not forget, we said we're going to learn about Chinese dynasties. You can look them up, okay? Let's go through some of the later ones, all right? Some of the later ones. But before we do that, let's have a look at China. Here we are. There it is. It's a big piece of land, like Australia. And they've always had a big influence. So the early emperors, some of the early emperors, unified the country way before the birth of Christ, before the Roman Empire. So, there we are. Now, who were this? The Qing dynasty, Qing, 1644 to 1912. That's when the dynasty's finished. But we might get Xi Jinping creating a dynasty, you never know. So here there's a little note at the end of this book. It says, the 8 major dynasties names in their Wade-Giles transliteration are Shang, Chu, Han, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing. That king is Qing. Ming. Yuan. The Ming dynasty is 1368 to 1644. So that's a couple hundred, 250. Yuan, 1279 to 1368, the Yuan dynasty. Welcome to Angela Imela. The Southern Song dynasty, 1127 to 1279, not very long. The Song dynasty was Northern Song, 960 to 1127. So the Song dynasty lasted from 960 to 1279. Again, about 400 years. 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, 1907, 1960, after the Tang dynasty. So the Tang dynasty was 618 to 907. And if we consider what happened right at the end, there are also some more years, up to 960. Before that, there was the Sui dynasty, 6 dynasties, 265, 589, 3 kingdoms, Eastern or later Han dynasty, Xin, Han Dynasty, Qin Dynasty, Zhou Dynasty, and Shang Dynasty. Those are the dynasties. We need to learn the dynasties of China in order to approach its history. Okay? And then also we need to do the geography part, the rivers, and yes, and the difference between northern China and middle China and southern China, going from very cold weather to tropical weather almost. Here it is, the flourishing. This is K1 rain period. K1. Here we are, portrait of Emperor Quanzong. Kaiwang Bao coins the longest lasting and most important form of currency used during the Tang dynasty. They had money, coins. The flourishing Kaiwan reign period. Kaiwan 713 to 741. So we're looking at 28 years there. Was the earlier reign title of Li Longji. Emperor Xuanzong 712 to 756. Whoa, that's a long reign. Oh no, he was born in 712 and died in 756. So he only died at the age of 44. Through over 100 years of development, from the beginning of Zheng I reign of Taizong to the end of Kai1 reign, the Tang dynasty became unprecedentedly prosperous. So this period was referred to as the prosperous Kai1 period. They looked after the people and everyone, prosperity. That's what we wish when we get a new year, prosperity. Emperor Xuanzong was the grandson of Wu Zetian, but he modelled his rule on that of Emperor Taizong. He made use of capable people, listened to his minister's advice, and devoted himself to state affairs. He demonstrated his capability with prompt measures 1 year by combating a plague of locusts in northern China and saved the people from starvation. There you are. And then you become famous and the people love you as long as they can eat. And that's what we do now. There's a period of great difficulties here in Australia, even though it's a wealthy country. For some people, it's a bit of a problem maintaining their houses, etc. So the government has to come in and help out. And we've got a Labor government in place, so let's see what happens. I think they'll be all right. The renowned poet Du Fu described the prosperity of that time in his poem, Remembering the Past. Remember the good old Kaiwan days, when even a small county had 10,000 households. The rice shone and the corn was white, and granaries of state and people burst with grain alike. During the K1 period, the society was stable and peaceful, and commerce and transportations were highly developed. Yangzhou, located where the Grand Canal meets the Yangtze River, was a bustling city where merchants from all over China and abroad converged. Chang'an, the capital of the Tang dynasty, was then one of the world's great metropolises. Envoys, merchants, scholars and artisans of many countries flocked to Chang'an to trade and to study the advanced culture and technology of the Tang dynasty. And this is whilst, the Dark Ages are in Europe. They had periods of great prosperity in China. So compare the history of one continent to another, the lands that were isolated by mountains and deserts, etc. And what did the Chinese do? They actually built a wall to keep them out. But that was what was said. But the reality was to keep the people in and be controlled. You can't go past because you belong here on this side, on the Chinese side. The revolt of An Lushan and Shi Siming. In the second half of his reign, during the Tianbao period, 742 to 756, Emperor Xuanzong was obsessed by his favorite concubine, Lady Yang. He neglected his duties and the court was corrupt and the army weak. And Lushan, 703 to 757, warmed his way into Emperor Xuanzong's confidence and took command of a great part of the armed forces. In the year of 755, An Lushan and Shi Siming staged a revolt in Fanyang with an army of 150,000 marching towards Shangan. This was known historically as the revolt of An Lushan and Shi Siming. It is until the year of 762 that the revolt was finally suppressed. The revolt did serious damage to the economy of North China and marked the decline of the Tang dynasty. So whenever there are wars, we can now let's look at this history period here. What's happening to Russia right now? Okay, now people who study history will say after this, Russia will go into decline economically after the wars. It's not good what they're doing to themselves by attacking a neighbouring country, who, by the way, have a lot of Russians in them as well. So when you've got a mix of the population from one country and the other, etc., like in Europe now, you'll find people from Southern Europe going to Northern Europe and vice versa, East to West. That's, you need the economy functioning, you need the transportation, you need peace, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work. So the K1 reign period, very interesting part. Okay, and Chang'an was the capital city of the Tang dynasty. Now, you see, I'm getting there too. I'm sort of learning myself what's going on here. So, that's it for now. I will continue with China next week. We're coming towards the end of this world history series. I suspect that by 65, less than 65, 70, I'll conclude this first part of this year, and I hope that we'll be able to continue then in the new year with a new vigour in terms of history and in terms of looking over the work that I've done so far. Okay, now, as I said, there was we had a problem with all my series because Africa was being left out. So I've decided to make amends to Africa and concentrate now on Africa and looking at the states of Africa, because I suspect not many people would know them. Let me see. I've got it here. Okay, the ones that we're doing at the moment. Okay, here we go. This is Africa here. Okay, and you can look it up. Down the bottom, we did South Africa, and we know what happened there. And in South Africa, there's Swaziland as well. But today I'm going to do Botswana and Namibia. Okay? And next to Botswana, there's Zimbabwe and Mozambique, which we'll do next week. So slowly I'll go through each one. All right? So that's it. Let's do Botswana first. Botswana, formerly the Bechuanaland Protectorate, situated on the central plateau of southern Africa and incorporating a large part of the Kalahari Desert, bounded by Cape Province to the south, the Transvaal to the southeast, Zimbabwe to the northeast, and the Caprivi Strip, and Zambia to the north, and to the west, Namibia. The area is approximately 222,000 square miles, 575 square kilometres. 575,000 square kilometres, and the population you got to look it up. We're going back to the 80s here. It must be more than that. So look up the population. Until 1965, the territory was administered from Mafeking in the Cape Province of South Africa, 16 miles outside its own territory. This is an old book. It doesn't matter it's an old book because we can catch up by looking up Botswana and saying what is there in Botswana today, and you can look it up in Google or Safari or Chrome, look it up, Botswana. 16 miles outside his own territory. In 1965, a new capital was established at Gaborone. I don't know whether it's still there. Little explorations took place until the early 19th century. In 1808, before the 19th century, little exploration, in other words, unknown, was just used as sort of like the Wild West sort of thing. It was like, it was the way it was. In 1818, the London Missionary Society established a mission at Kuruman, just south of the Molopo River in the Northern Cape. And from there, missionaries, explorers, including David Livingstone, ranged widely through the territory. After the Sand River Convention in 1852, the Boers began to infiltrate and the protection of British troops was sought in the 1870s. In 1885, the three main chiefs petitioned for British protection, which was granted in 1896. The final stage of the Cape Bulawayo railway line, which passes through the territory, was completed. So they used the railways in the 19th century to open up the lands in Botswana. In 1910, by an order in council, the protectorate was placed under the wing of the United Kingdom High Commissioner in South Africa, along with the two other African territories in Basutoland and Swaziland. The three then being known as the High Commission territories, each with its own resident commissioner. The resident commissioner of Bechuanaland was guided by an African Advisory Council, which eventually became a legislative assembly when the territory achieved independence as the Republic of Botswana within the Commonwealth in September 1966. And now they've had more than 50 years, 56 years of independence. I wonder what's going on here now. Okay, that was Botswana. Interesting one. Now the next one is Namibia. And Namibia, there was very little in the books. Couldn't find anything. So I resorted to our dear friends. Okay, our dear friend here called, a mobile, Namibia. And I showed you where Namibia was. You remember? Yes, you want to see it again? We'll have a look. Here we are. There's Namibia there. Okay. Walsh Bay. And the title of Ludaris, Wickbrook, Cape Town is South Africa. So those are the towns. Okay? So Namibia. Namibia, a country in Southwest Africa, is distinguished by the Namib Desert along its Atlantic Ocean coast, The country is home to diverse wildlife, including a significant cheetah population. The capital, Windhoek, and coastal town Swakopmund contain German colonial-era buildings such as Windhoek Christuskirche, built in 1907 in the north. Etosha National Park, salt pan, draws game, including rhinos and giraffes. Now, what the interesting part, I looked up the climate. Namibia is one of the largest and driest countries in sub-Saharan Africa and is characterized by high climatic variability through persistent droughts, unpredictable and variable rainfall patterns, variability in temperatures, and water scarcity. The climate is generally hot and dry with sparse and erratic rainfall. So that's Namibia for you. I'm not going to do any more, of course, because, you know, that's how we go here well, that's good. Now we go to before the invasion. All right. So there you are. I'm using my technology now to get to where I want to get, and I thank everyone involved in making books, making tablets, making iPhones, allowing us this luxury of shared knowledge. And it's all free from me. I don't want anything. You can share it, share what I do. Please do, because, you know, most other people do come on, but I've noticed not many people make comments, nor do they share my work. Well, it is educational in nature, so you can put your own spin on it. So yeah, I agree with TomPadula. We did Africa, we did Namibia, Botswana, you know, the Tang dynasty. I learned something about that, etc. We went to England in the Middle Ages. We did this, we did that. So that's the sort of thing that you can say, and that's what will bring the world closer. Because the more people share this sort of idea that the world belongs to humanity. The nations are old-fashioned now, but we need nations in order to administer what there is and the people. Otherwise, you need some direction, whether we like it or not. Government is important. Doesn't matter which government it is, but government you must have. The choice of government, and it's up to us, up to the people. If they are lazy, they don't want to do anything, they just want to say, all right, dictator, you can do whatever you want. Or you can say, no. We want to have a say. You know, we're going to elect our leaders, and they have to respond to us. And that's how it is. Now, last week we were talking about ceremonies within the Aboriginal communities in Australia before the invasion, before 1788, because Captain Arthur Phillips arrived in. Captain Cook arrived in 1770. Therefore, he didn't stay in Australia. He came and went. He was a tourist. He did what he had to do and went away. But because of that, the seeds of knowledge remained. And therefore, this guy called James Matra, a Corsican who lived in New York, he sided with the British in the American Civil War. And he said, we want some land. We've lost the ones we had in America, in the United States. How about Australia? And so what happened was that that was the idea, the initial idea, is to give free land to people who had sided with the Americans in the Civil War. But it didn't happen that way. The twists and turns of history. It happened that during that time, then in the British government, the English kings, if you like, their governments, they could all the criminals were put in ships on the Thames. There are too many of them. They said, let's get rid of some. Let's send them to Australia. And so they paid for it, and Captain Arthur Phillips, of course, took some of his a few soldiers, a few guards, and a whole group of prisoners. And some of them, all they had done was steal a loaf of bread, for heaven's sake. But some of them were pretty rough, so. And again, you can go into the details of this history in Australia. Okay, so what were the non-sacred ceremonies of the Aborigines? Finally, there were the ordinary non-sacred ceremonies when people came together for singing and dancing to relax and enjoy themselves. Generally, the songs and dances were all about the group's everyday life. All aspects of tribal life could be commented on except for the most deeply sacred. Performances of special merit became so popular that they were repeated long after the original event which they described had been forgotten. Most songs were short and rather repetitious. One example of a typical non-sacred song from Western Arnhem Land would read, "Now I go to climb the rock, they light a fire, I look down into the flames of the fire burning at Umperli." Another example of a man away from his country and his wife is, "You and I, let's go to the point. We look at the writing rock and watch the rain far off, falling on my darling." You have to interpret it as well. Another example, this time from the mouth of the River Murray, reads, "Listen, everyone, the thunder rumbles just above. Too near, so close and dangerous. Forked lightning, it's striking. Keep a look out. Beware of thin raging thing." Whatever. How would you sing it? "Listen, everyone, the thunder rumbles just above," and etc. "Too near, so close and dangerous." No, I can't sing it the indigenous way. We need to have a little knowledge of this. And let's hope that our indigenous people will allow the teaching of their languages in our schools, in our major schools. And they should, probably say, if you want one of our languages, come on, go for it. Teach it if you must. Okay, music. The sound of music in Australia before the invasion was totally different from what we hear today. It was nearly all singing with very few musical instruments. Europeans would find the music very hard to sing properly because the scale of notes was different. The tunes might sound fairly simple, but the rhythms were very complicated. There might be 2 or 3 rhythms going on at once, as in jazz. The style of singing varied between regions of Australia, and so did the melodies and the rhythms. In some areas, for example, northeastern South Australia, the men sang in a light, husky style, but in Western South Australia, they sang with more natural voices, which I personally prefer. A natural voice allows you to sing with your own voice. You're not trying to copy somebody else. All over Australia, the rhythm was marked by hand clapping, thigh slapping. That sort of thing. In Arnhem Land, for example, the people used special clapsticks, but in the Western Desert, they used either 2 boomerangs clapped together or a boomerang hitting a shield. We would use a spoon against some pottery or whatever. You can use forks, different utensils. You can make music out of them. Clap together, or a boomerang hitting a shield. In some ceremonies, the women beat out the rhythm by clapping their hands or beating a cupped hand on the thigh. When 30 or 40 women did this all together, it made a thick thumping noise. In Victoria, the women kept time by beating a stick on folded skin rugs. In the northern areas of Australia, the didgeridoo was used in the accompaniment. The didgeridoo was a hollow branch from a tree. When the player blew through with his lips, vibrating, it added a different deep, loud sound to the basic rhythm of the clicking sticks and the thumping on the ground or body. In the Aboriginal rhythm section, there were three basic sounds: a heavy bass from the ground or body thumping, the high clicks of the sticks, and the deep bass, the treble sound of the didgeridoo. Along the northern coastline, the people also had lizard skin drums, shell rattles, and a type of nose flute like those used in Asia and New Guinea. And we're going to stop there. We'll continue next week, of course. Now, we go to Banjo Patterson. Here we go. I love this one here. It's a short poem, but it's one that I've actually translated into Italian as well. It's called The Road to Old Man's Town. The fields of youth are filled with flowers. The wine of youth is strong. What need have we to count the hours? The summer days are long. But soon we find to our dismay that we are drifting down the barren slopes that fall away towards the foothills grim and grey that lead to Old Man's Town. And marching with us on the track, full many friends we find. We see them looking sadly back for those that dropped behind. But God forbid a fate so dread, alone to travel down the dreary road we all must tread, with faltering steps and whitening head, the road to Old Man's Town. You don't want to be alone when you get old. You need help. We're doing a good job with our people here in Australia. It started 40, 50 years ago and even before, but now we're very well organised in terms of looking after older people. And why not? They have read The Road to Old Man's Town, and all politicians should read it as well. Very important for our social work. Henry Lawson was a good writer of short stories, but I've got to do my work with Henry Lawson. Forgive me, Henry. I'm using your, the short stories rather than your poetry, but never mind. We'll get there eventually. And on that note, I will drink to you. Yes, and there's no spirit in here. Good old water. Here we go. Hungerford is the title of this particular short story. I'm going to read it in it'll be couple more lessons after this, which is good because we'll probably get to number 65 lesson. One of the hungriest cleared roads in New South Wales runs to within a couple of miles of Hungerford and stops there. Then you strike through the scrub to the town. There is no distant prospect of Hungerford. You don't see the town till you are quite close to it. And then 2 or 3 whitewashed galvanised iron roofs start out of the mulga. They say that a past ministry commenced to clear the road from Burke under the impression that Hungerford was an important place, and went on with the blindness peculiar to governments till they got to within 2 miles of the town. They stopped short of going to the town. Then they ran short of rum and rations and sent a man out to get them and make inquiries. The member never came back, and 2 more were sent to find him or Hungerford. 3 days later, the two returned in an exhausted condition and submitted a motion of want of confidence, which was lost. Then the whole house went on and was lost also. Strange to relate that government was never missed. However, we found Hungerford and camped there for a day. The town is right on the Queensland border and on an interprovincial rabbit-proof fence. Rabbit-proof fence. A rabbit-proof fence. Does that remind you of a film? This was Henry Lawson. He lent his saying, his description to the film, with rabbits on both sides of it run across the main street. Rabbits on both sides. This fence is a standing joke with Australian rabbits, about the only joke they have out there except the memory of Pasteur and poison and inoculation. It is amusing to go a little way out of town about sunset and watch them crack Noah's Ark rabbit jokes about that fence and burrow under and play leapfrog over till they get tired. One old buck rabbit sat up and nearly laughed his ears off at a joke of his own about that fence. He laughed so much that he couldn't get away when I reached for him. I could hardly eat him for laughing. I never saw a rabbit laugh before, but I've seen a possum do it. A possum laughs. Wow. I didn't know that. I did not know that. It'll be 2 more sessions. Okay. So that's that. How are we doing for time? 12:18. I've got here, of course, my trip to Northern Australia and Western Australia. Okay, and so here we go. We're going to get ourselves all organised in order to follow the trials of TomPadula in July of 2022. Okay, now how do I do this? I can't remember. Oh, yes, I remember now. Have I done it? No. Okay, let's start. Oh, gosh. Forgive me. Here we go. Okay, let's go. Now, here, this is the trip now. This is the Mueller Ranges in Australia's northwest. Okay, and yep, and here. There we are. There's there, looking very pensive. Well, why? Because the terrain. Hey, look at this. A lot of land, flat land, northwest Australia. There you are. Good. Next one. Yes, here, more of it. You get an idea. That's why I play it. You get an idea of the Mueller Ranges, which will lead us to some hills with, with rocks. Plenty of rocks there. Next one. So it's starting to change now. Well, you're traveling with me by doing this. And I had you in mind when I was doing it. Of course, I always have other people in mind. There you are. Now we'll start looking at the trees. Don't get tired. There you are. More. Gosh. After this, there will be some still pictures. There you are. I thought there was enough. So there you are. These are the still pictures, see? And you start, look at those, the mounds. Do you remember those mounds? By trees, nothing around. More mounds. Look at that. Look at that. Plenty of them. And they were widening the road. It's good to see that all these people are working. Government at work, huh? More. A slightly different look. It's a different look, this one. More work. There you are. These are the rocks I was talking about. This is the Mueller Ranges. Beautiful pic, this one. Very artistic. A lot of rocks, huh? And more distance. Look at that. Back. See the ridge there? Amazing. Okay. Very flat, huh? There's some animals at the back there. Obviously coming closer to a town. There in the background, cattle. That's not cattle. Oh gosh. Oh, well, we'll just move on. See cattle in the back. Wow. There it is. See? I got really excited about this. This is now Mary Pool, Mueller Ranges, Mary Pool. We stopped for toilet break, they called it. And we saw a bit of, I got excited seeing some animals. Look at the cows. Oh. That's our bus. More cows coming to say hello. I thought I'd have some company. Look at a whole lot of cows there. Okay, a few of the people, including Angela. This is a good way to start. It's 11:30. I have to finish. Let me see where we are. This is called Fitzroy River, Fitzroy Crossing. So it's a good place to stop. Good place to stop. Fitzroy Crossing. There we are. That's the Fitzroy River. Okay, and here is me. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. It's we saw a bit of the northwest of Australia, and we'll continue along those lines. It's very interesting after this. We live the drier part, more towns, and we get to Broome. It's a bit to watch. It's good. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it today. I did too myself. I'm looking forward to taking a break from world history and then continue again, like with Italian. Same thing, give myself a bit of a break, have a bit of a think of what I've done, make sure that all this work is up on YouTube and Insegna.com. So don't forget to go to Insegna.com, look it up and share the work. When you see it on your phone, share the work that I've done. Some people might become interested as a result. Okay, on that note, thank you very much for coming on, to those people who have, and for the ones who are going to come on during the week, grazie mille, thank you. All I can say is now, the festive season, Buon Natale, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You know, let's enjoy the next a few weeks. It's fun time, holiday time, festive time. And this is Tom Padula from TomPadulaTV on YouTube and Insegna Booksellers. Ciao.